Good morning. It's glad to be back. I've been gone for 2 weeks down in Florida, kind of a work vacation. More work than vacation, but I'm glad to be back. A few weeks ago, when Pastor Michael asked me to talk, I thought it was more of a PSA, a public service announcement for GROW, which is a part of the Reach, Connect, Grow, and Serve. Well, did I know that it was actually, no, you're going to speak all morning. And I noticed I didn't say preach because I never have a calling to be a preacher, but I am a teacher, and so hopefully you'll allow me to teach. And as I was thinking about it, this thing kind of grew into more than just talking about grow. We'll spend most of our time a little bit focusing on grow, but we're going to really address all of that. But as you know, since I said I was a teacher, I am in fact literally a teacher now. I'm going to be starting my third year. I'm kind of late to the game. It took me about 30 years of deviation to become what I thought I always should have been as a school teacher, and I teach math. And I teach math to middle school students, and I really do enjoy it. Yeah, I know. Thank you, God, for that gift. But because I'm a teacher, you're going to have to do some work, okay? So on the back of your bulletin, there are some areas for taking notes, and I'm going to ask you to take some notes, and I'll help you along the way. And on the bottom, leave the bottom part for the very end, because I actually have a little activity for you to do. Okay, so this is going to be a little more interactive. I don't want you just sitting there throughout the time we have together this morning. And so if you need to get a writing utensil or something like that, that'd be great. Okay, so as I told you, this became a little bit bigger. And so what I wanted to do is kind of piggyback what you actually said, though we hadn't really compared notes, but we do share the same spirit. And that is kind of talk about vision. Go ahead. And next slide, please. Is that it kind of goes to talk about the vision. And what we know in Proverbs is that without vision, the people will perish, right? In the New Testament, or in the NIV version, it says, where there's no revelation, people will cast off restraint. But blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. And so I really want to talk about some of the vision in maybe a slightly different way. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of have 4 lanes of thought. And if I'm successful, I'm going to tie it all together and put a bow on it and send you on your way. Okay? So here's my first lane. My first lane over here really happened outside of church. It was at work in my previous employer. I was at a intra-company conference with a bunch of engineers, R&D, and one of the engineers spoke, and he said something to me that was really kind of life-altering, even though it didn't come from the Bible. There is no chapter and verse for this. But what he said to me was this. Go ahead, slide. Everything is a process. That you have inputs over time and space resulting in an outcome or an output. And if you want to write down everything is a process, that would be really good. I think that's kind of a key takeaway, because that would be something that really changed how I looked at many good things. Now, as a math teacher, I teach geometry to 8th graders. And we get to what's called the reason and logic section. We talk about inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning. And one of the things we talk about in terms of trying to determine truth is that if it's not true, you use a counterexample. If you can find one counterexample, then that statement no longer is true. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about all the different things that I do and try to determine if I can find a counterexample to this statement. Everything is a process that with input over time and space results in an outcome or an output. I have yet to find anything, and now I'm going to ask you, think about it for a moment. Can you think of anything? Education, starting as a kindergarten, you come out as a 12th grader, and the outcome, a diploma, right? Making breakfast, getting dressed, driving to school, driving to work, coming to church. This whole process right now. Everything is a process. It really kind of changes how you look at things, doesn't it? Okay. Second lane. Go ahead, next slide. We already talked about this a little bit. We talked about the mission, our purpose, our strategy, our values. Okay? Now, if you look at some of those things, let's take our strategy. To create environments. Well, there's a process there, right? Where people are encouraged to insert intimacy with God in healthy relationships. Oh, there's probably a process there. And connections with our community. Now, you can now look at purpose. Let's take a look at purpose. To be a church where people experience the life-transforming power and love of God in their everyday lives. How do we know that that's actually happening? How do we see that that's going on? Pretty hard. If you're in manufacturing, which is where I came from before, you have raw materials and you have finished goods. You can measure how much raw materials I used, how much my finished goods are. And I can see and I can make different processes. But how do we do that spiritually? It's a challenge. I don't think it's easy. But what I want to do is just for a moment is let you think about the mission and our purpose and our strategy and our values as kind of outcomes. Okay? Just for a minute. Remember, everything's a process, and these are kind of outcomes. It's going to be hard to show power and love in a tangible way, but we know it's there. We can see it, we can sense it, but it's really hard to measure. We can sense environments, if they're loving or not, but they're going to be hard to measure. But those are outcomes. So how do we, as a corporate body, come up with this idea of achieving those goals? Next slide. Lane number 3. Reach, connect, grow, and serve. Okay? It's a process. It's a process. Everything's a process with inputs and outputs over time and space. And so we've approached this idea of trying to impact our community through this process. Now, reach, connect, and grow is unique. Serve is a special kind of process, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I would like to do is maybe put some words behind that. Next slide, please. It's by saying this. The River Church exists to reach people in our community who consider Christ unimportant in their daily lives, help them to find a place to connect with other Christians, encouraging them to grow in their faith and to serve God for a lifetime. That are all different types of processes. Okay? So we have some processes that we're trying to implement to achieve our mission and goal, because we realize that everything is a process. Following my lanes? Let's talk to my last lane. Next slide. It's called the Great Commandment. And it says this, it reads, and Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Let me just distill it down to a little further. Next slide, please. Love God, love people, right? And we just finished a series on relationships, did we not? It's really all about relationships. Go ahead. I think it's a building slide. Go ahead. And if you recall, not that long ago, you saw this slide. I think back at the end of June, during right before we went to eat some good food over at the shelter number 1 over at the park, Pointer Rocks, right? Which, by the way, if you think about it, is a Connect event, wasn't it? There was a process behind that. A lot of people did a lot of work to make that happen, right? And hopefully the outcome is that we did some water skiing, we did some snorkeling, and we did some deep sea diving, right? That was the challenge that Pastor Michael asked us to do, remember? But while I'm sitting there and listening to him speak, go ahead, next slide. This is what I was thinking. Skiing, surface relationships. Go ahead, to build slide, just click on it. Oh, it doesn't, all right, the software doesn't work. Okay. I'll just go ahead and talk it to it. PowerPoint and the software doesn't always work. I didn't know that. Okay, so if you're talking about skiing, that's a reach, right? Surface level, just making a connection. Oh, you got it? Oh, you did it. Awesome. Snorkeling. Connect. Deep sea diving. What is that? Grow. So that's how my mind worked. Wow. With relationships, right? We're talking about reaching, connecting, and growing. And then serve as a unique one. We'll get to it in a minute. But you're kind of following how that works. For me, I said, okay, that makes this whole idea of reach, connect, grow, serve as a process kind of, in my mind, validates because, as you know, everything's a process. Is that making sense? Okay. So, let's talk about reach a little more in detail. Go ahead, next slide. I'm afraid there's a building slide in there too. With reach, corporately, try to see if you can advance it. There's kind of three things that we corporately have or do as a body. And the first one is the child care center. It meets a need in our community. That is probably the beacon for this church in terms of reaching our community, right, feeding a need. There's two kind of corporate activities that we do, one in the spring and one in the fall. That's the Easter egg hunt and the fall festival, all right? Those are what happens at a corporate level. But this also happens on an individual level. Let me explain. When I was asked to carry the buns, the hot dog buns and the hamburger buns to the picnic, I said, sure. But I realized that Irma and I had to drive back to Food Line to pick up a few things that we forgot, that we promised to take to the activity. And when we got there, some guy walked up to me just randomly and asked me, and I get this occasionally, do you think, I think you look like Warner, the congressman or the senator, John Warner. And I said, I get that from time to time, more when he was the governor than I do now, but I don't see it, but sure, if you think so. And he made a reach out to me. But I was focused on getting back with the hot dog buns, right? And then I started a conversation with him that went on for a while. Now, my A-type personality to get there on time and everything was usually what I do, and I would miss that opportunity. But for that moment, Irma and I engaged this guy in a conversation, resulting in, hey, what are you doing? You want to come and have some food? We're having a picnic at the church. Oh, no, thank you very much, but I'm busy. And went down and sat down. I don't know what he was doing, but he wasn't with us. So there was that connect, right? So I took an opportunity that we were skiing, try to drive it to a snorkel. It didn't happen, but you see, it can work at many different levels. And so I'm not talking about just corporately, though that's my focus, but think about it personally in your life, how that may happen, how that may look like. Okay? Well, this is going to be a problem. Okay. The next one is called connect. And yeah, there's some more. We'll see what we can do on that. And connect typically happens every week. Here. Now. Okay? That's how we get together corporately, and we intentionally want to connect, particularly to those of you who perhaps are here for the very first time. We want to do some more snorkeling. It may lead to some deep sea diving, but we're just establishing more than just water skiing because we know that's dangerous if you're over the age of 25. Okay? So But this is our opportunity, particularly if guests come to our place of worship, to make sure they felt warm and connected. Okay? And so that is, now connection happens in many other ways, or it should. But as a corporate group, as a vision, what we're trying to do is do that here and now. So if there's someone you do not know before you leave, you should walk up to them and introduce yourself. Find out what their interests are. You may have something in common. Okay? The last one is grow. And I think I got some building slides again, and that might not work. But with grow, we are establishing what's called River Community Groups, RCGs, or RGCs. I get it all mixed up, yeah. A little dyslexic. And which is kind of fun is because R stands for, C stands for, G stands for grow. I hear them a lot of different ways. At the church that my dad likes to go to, though he never remembers that he went there, every time he goes, it's the first time he's ever been, just kind of where we're at. But they have a really cool drummer, and he drums, and that beat, he gets that music, and he's all excited, and then it's an event that's never to be remembered again. But for the moment, it's awesome. And at that church, they call their community groups connect groups. Interesting they use the same term, but they have the same goal or purpose. Okay? And that's, right, discipleship. It's all about discipleship. Okay, that's where it really happens, it goes on. Now, when I was down there for the last 2 weeks, I was driving around, taking care of my father's affairs. We were kind of channel surfing the radio, and it came across some really interesting things. And that's a setup for my next slide. Many, many years ago, I started with the teens at the church that I was attending, JCDC, not to be confused with ACDC. JCDC stood for Jesus Christ Discipleship Club. Okay, and one of the things that we kind of came up with during that time together was this idea that Christianity, first it costs you nothing, and then it costs you everything. Now, I kind of came up with that. And then I realized, no, nothing's new under the sun. Solomon said that long before I was here. But I kind of liked it, and it makes sense because for many people, they like the first part and they stop. They don't so much do the second part, right? But then on the radio, I listened to a guy you all heard. His name is Billy Graham. Heard of him? And he said, back when I was still probably in diapers, back in '66, he said, salvation is free, but discipleship costs everything we have. I kind of like his, right? And so really, to carry the banner of Christianity, to say I'm a Christian, requires some discipleship, and to be disciplined in the ways that God has designed us to be, that has been altered because of sin, but to bring us back, right? And so that's some work. And for us, that discipleship really occurs during small groups, the community groups that we have together. And so, go ahead to the next one. So when we grow, I set up a vision, because with vision and with a goal, then you know when things are accomplished or done. And the reason why we're kind of presenting these things to you, as you saw some of the goals, some of them didn't show up, is the thing that came from corporate called SMART goals. Ever heard of SMART goals before? I heard of, huh? Yeah. Why are they SMART? Do you know? It's technology, but it actually stands for, make sure I get this right, SMART is an acronym for being specific, measurable, achievable, R, relevant, and T, time-bound. So let's take a look at the vision that I was asked to come up with for prayer and consideration through our conversations with Michael is, hey, let's try to make sure we have 3 off-site small groups functioning by the end of this calendar year. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? Is it time-bound? Now, here's the other thing about SMART, and why I like how it was presented to me and my previous employer through a third party. It says that a goal isn't a goal until the implementers buy in. So all the slides and all the things that the different people, particularly in a leadership position in this church, can set these goals, but it really doesn't really happen until what? Until I get the buy-in. I kind of say it's a top-down vision, bottom-up validation, is what I wrote in my notes 5 or 6 years ago. Top-down vision, bottom-up validation. And so that's where having a conversation like this is fine, but if we all go away and say, well, wasn't that nice, and then nothing gets done. And so really it's goal writing, not goal setting, until there's a buy-in. If that makes any sense. Okay, I'm done with that. Huh? Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do is set a vision that meets those SMART goals that would help us, because that is where discipleship, that is kind of the engine that drives a lot of the other stuff. That growth that happens spiritually will spill over in all the different areas of our life. Hopefully you can build the next slide on there. Perfect. And there's a lot of different types of groups. You have the Bible study and discipleship group. It's highlighted in yellow because I'm going to spend a little more time on there. But there's other types. You can have recovery groups. You can have marriage and parenting. In fact, that Connect group that I mentioned to you about at the church that I attended down in Florida, they were focusing actually on parenting and marriage, and that there was a parenting group, and how this single mom, spiritually speaking, because dad wasn't really interested in spiritual things, was trying to raise her 2 daughters, and how that group helped her as she went through what we all go through as we try to raise our kids. Okay, so that's more. It still is a group. It does all the things that we need it to do, but it's a little more defined. And then, of course, there's special interest groups, and each of those will kind of take on their own style and format to achieve the goals for that group. But let's talk about Bible study and discipleship. Many of you have expressed an interest in attending, some of you in leadership. And we talked about training, and I really thought about training a little bit more. And I come to the understanding and realization there's really not a whole lot of training. There is some training that really is necessary. First of all, do you love God? Do you love people? You're qualified. Right? You don't have to have a PhD behind your name or other letters behind your name. You love God? You love people. But a Bible study is a process, because remember, everything's a process. So let me tell you kind of what the process happens in my small group, because that's the only one I can really address. It tends to be a Bible study discipleship group. It usually starts with about 30 minutes of fellowship, which includes coffee and sweets, right? And oh, by the way, that's kind of snorkeling, right? We're snorkeling. How's it going? What's going on, right? It ends with prayer. We're doing some deep sea diving, okay? Things are shared there that are pretty amazing. Tough stuff, okay? And in between, that transition is, in fact, the learning, the growing, okay? As its facilitator, I typically don't teach. Sometimes I do very little prep. Our last study that just finished was 15 weeks or 15 different characteristics of God. Did you even know there were 15? There's probably more. But and each little, and we used the video, and the video was 23 minutes, and had enough at 23. It was, whoa. And then we just discussed, what does it really mean about God's goodness? God's grace, okay? His omnipresence, his omniscience, all these different things. Because as you start to really understand and appreciate who God is, really makes you want to be on his team, because his team wins. Just to let you know, right? His team wins. You remember what the other ones were? Justice? Yeah, the last one was wrath, which was kind of scary a little bit, but yeah, that. What else? Do you remember other ones? It's okay if you don't. But if we don't do that, we were studying a book of the Bible. I'll do some prep, but here are the 3 questions, and they all know what the 3 questions are. They're coming. It's called an inductive Bible study. What does it say? Just rephrase. What does it mean? A little more discussion, a little deeper, right? What does it say? Skiing. What does it mean? Snorkeling. What does it mean to me? Now I'm deep diving. That's application. How is it going to change my life to be different? How am I going to act differently in school the next day, or at work the next day, okay? Or with my spouse right now, or whatever that may be, okay? So that's where the discipleship, the disciplining happens, because everything's a process. So that's how that works for grow. Now, the last one is serve. And what I like about serve, it too is a process. But it's also an outcome, because once you reach and connect and you're really growing, the natural outcome for you to do is what? Serve. It's an outcome, but it's also its own process. And it really takes 2 forms. The first form is ministry. I call that intra-service, inside, in the family. What we do with each other, to each other, to strengthen each other and raise each other up. Okay? The second one is mission. And mission, it tends to be outside, inter-service, okay? And it's in the community. What can we do to our community, with our community, to make it better? Let them know who we are and why we do what we do. Isn't that reach? Now we're right back to the top of that circle. So the whole reason why I'm talking about this is it just gives us language, terminology, to describe a very complex thing about our mission, our purpose, our strategy, and our values. It gives us a language that allows us to understand how I can quickly say, hey, look, we're going to do an event. It's a Connect event. Bingo. Okay, I know its purpose. I know its function. I know what's going to happen and why we're doing it. Because we're trying to create environments, right? We want to try to create intimacy, relationships, and connection. Part of our strategy. Okay? We're going to do the fall festival. I know what that is. That's a reach. It's transactional, it has a beginning and has an end, but we're trying to serve our community with an event so that we can reach. Okay? Now, I'm trying to struggle if I want to do this. I've been here now for just about a year. And I remember as we were approaching quickly the fall festival from last year, which I have to tell you was amazing. Blew my socks off, right? But I was sitting there, and they're like, look, we still need some volunteers, and passed the sign-up sheet around. And I got to tell you, the first thing I thought was, how unfortunate. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend, but how unfortunate. Why aren't we running to sign up? Right? Now, my thought was this, and take me wrong, I'm not trying to guilt you or make you feel bad or anything, but just my observation, as a feedback, okay, is I was one of those, but I was a newbie. I was trying to figure everything out. Now, that wasn't an excuse, but that was like, wow. Now, people did sign up, and it went off, I would say, flawlessly. It was awesome. But wouldn't it have been really nice if Nicole knew in July who her core folks are for October? Because that's a lot of work for Nicole. She's not here. But she had to carry that burden of the whole thing until the very end, until we all came to her rescue at the end. So that's just kind of a challenge. It's not an admonition, but just a challenge of an observation of a new guy, because I'm relatively new. And so there might be some new people here going, right? How does this all work, right? Is there a buy-in? Okay, and so that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. Now, I'm going to have some fun, all right? I'm going to go through my last lane. It's a building slide, so hopefully it will work. We'll see. Now, notice I said there's 3 groupings of people. I didn't say 3 types, because I don't want to type people, and I think we all live at one time or another in one of these 3 circles. And for all of you students, looks kind of like a what? What kind of diagram is that when they have overlapping circles? What? A Venn diagram. Yeah, a Venn diagram. Okay. And they're overlapping a little bit, so we'll see how it goes. So the first group of people, go ahead, are people who make things happen. We like to think about that we think we're the make things happen kind of people. But really, the second group is where most people are and most people stay, and that's the second one. We watch things happen. Not wrong, I'm not trying to value, but then there's also that group of people that, go ahead, wonder what just happened. Right? Now, to be honest, we've all been in all 3 circles. The goal is just not to live in circle 3. Right? True? And why we laugh is because we probably know of someone who lives in circle 3 way too much time, right? True? Okay. But even though the circles are a little bit smaller as they go from left to right, that's more of a graphics thing. I think that the majority of us tend to sit in circle 2 and most of the time. And then I kind of think of it like a basketball game, right? Guys that make it happen are the guys that are on the floor. The rest of us are either on the bench or in the stands. And then there's a bunch of people out in the parking lot who have no idea what's going on. Right? So what I want you to do to think about today, and this is where we kind of get to the homework part. Okay? When we get to the homework part is this. I'm going to ask you to move to circle 1 for a little bit. Okay? And I want you to look at it this way. Go ahead, next slide. I want you to be deliberate and intentional. And some things that I'm going to ask you to do are transactional, like the Fall Festival. Other things like joining a small group, that's a continuous dedication, a little bit challenging. But I want you to look at, so I don't want you to look at what I'm talking about here as a sales pitch to join small groups, because if that's, or I'm guilting you into doing that, because you might do it, you'll do it for a while, and then there's no staying power. And for many of us, it's like, oh, I got another busy thing I need to add to my already packed calendar. But at the bottom, I want you to make the columns, and I want start, stop, and change. Start, stop, and change. And corporately, as Michael alluded to, as we kind of connected when I first came here, and we had some good conversations, I said to him, I said, Michael, what are you going to start doing as a church? Starting is pretty easy. And then I said, Michael, what are you going to stop doing? And in the church body, are there any sacred cows that you're going to slaughter by stop doing them? Right? And then what are we going to change so it matches this process of reach, connect, grow, and serve, so we can achieve our mission, purpose, strategy, and demonstrate our values while doing it? So are you ready to do that? said yes, it's okay, I'm still here. If you said no, all right? Now I'm going to ask you on an individual basis. If you're not in a small group, why not? If discipleship is the key thing of our growth, what's stopping you? What do you need to start? What do you need to stop? And what do you need to change to establish your priorities to line that with the mission, purpose, strategy, and demonstrate our values in doing it? Because everything's a process. Ouch, you're making me think. That hurts. Now, for many of you, you will get the homework assignment done while in class. Some of you are going to have to take it home as homework. But I'm going to ask right up front, and I'm embarrassed, I shouldn't do that, is that I want to have a public service announcement asking them how's their homework doing. Right? It's a project. Okay? Understand this. This process, this project, comes due upon death when you stand in front of the pearly gate. Your entrance ticket's already solved. But he's going to ask you what you do to help mission, purpose, strategy. And you go, well, I watch a lot of television. Play golf 3 times a week. Right? Again, I'm not here to guilt. That's not my intention. But I'm just trying to, I don't know, some Greek philosopher said that an unexamined life is not worth living. I don't know, it was Aristotle or Socrates. I don't know which one. Could be wrong on either count. But examine. Take time. And so I'm going to ask the guys in the back, if just for a few moments, or if you're coming up here, it's fine, just to play some quiet music. And I want just to give you time in class to do your homework. Okay? On an individual basis. What are you going to stop? What are you going to start? What are you going to change? Now, for starters, well, you don't have to be big. It doesn't mean home runs. Do something simple. Michael mentioned earlier about the Bible confession. And he said, take it home, put it on the refrigerator. Well, here's something you might want to start. Put it on your mirror in your bathroom. And when you get up in the morning, read it. Every day. That's pretty easy. Probably life-changing, too. Because as you start your day with that mindset, I think it'll spill over on how you talk to people, how you look at yourself, etc. And it kind of meets that smart. So when you come up with stuff that you're going to start, stop, or change, think about the SMART principle. All right? Is it specific? Can I measure it? Can I achieve it? Is it time-bound? Is it relevant? But what am I going to start? What am I going to stop? What can I change to make it line up? Now, understand, starting and stopping is a healthy thing. I will tell you, in my group, historically, we've been at it for many, many years, probably at least a decade. We stop in August. They're tired of looking at me. I'm tired of looking at them. We need to refresh, right? I'm not really tired, but you know what I'm saying. And because I say this jokingly, please understand, daddy issues that I have to address usually in July, we actually stopped earlier. So it'll be about six weeks that we will not meet. And then come September, after the holidays are all over and school starts, Labor Day weekend, we will start back up again. So maybe you say, look, it's summer, things are a little goofy. You say, by September 15th, I'll either start or join or start a small group in my home on Tuesday nights. Okay? That's a big ask, but I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying that that's what you need to do. I'm just saying I want you to pray about it. So for the next couple minutes, just play some quiet music. I want you to think about it, pray about it, and really kind of give some thought about how do you agree with, is everything a process? Do you understand and agree the mission? Do you understand the reach, connect, grow, and serve? And that for grow, very specifically, it's discipleship, and discipleship occurs, at least in this body of believers, in small groups. Are you committed to doing that? And if I am, what am I going to do to make that happen? What am I going to stop doing to make that happen? What do I need to do differently to make that happen? And that could also include serve. Okay, you might say, you know what? Typically, I'm not available in October or in April for our Reach events, but this year, because it's transactional, there's a beginning and an end. I'm going to let Nicole know that I'm going to help, and I'm going to let her know now, and that she's going to count on me, and I'm going to show up at the meetings, and then I'm going to help her if she gives me a task and get it, if it's within my ability to complete, do so. Those are the small things. You believe how big they are. Again, this is not my intent to guilt or to point blame or anything like that, but just causing you to stop in our busy lives and think about how we're going to reach, connect, grow, and serve each other in our community.
Let's give Jeff a hand for bringing the word this morning. Amen. Amen. How many of you were challenged today? Amen. When God gives the word, he says we're blessed when we're doers of the word, right? How many of you feel stretched? Maybe you got a stretch mark or two. Not a bad thing. But you know what? This is an opportunity. We're building towards the fall. If you would like to be a River Community Group leader, Jeff is the individual that you want to see. He's our group champion, our grow champion, amen. And so there's a lot to chew on. I want to encourage you to take some time, like Jeff was saying, and examine what are the things that you need to stop. Because you're the only one that can make them stop, right? What you need to start, you're the only one that can hit go. And when you make those decisions, we'll see change, amen. So take some time. We've got an opportunity to connect with one another. There's information on our River Community Groups in your bulletin that you can attend this week. And I just want to bless you and thanks for coming out. Spend some time fellowshipping, connecting, and God bless you. Amen.